What's going on, everyone? Travis Brown with the Eagle. I'm here with also fellow Eagleettes, as he likes to say, Robert Cessna and Alex Miller. We're here with our guest, Dave Matter of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, covers Missouri up there, who is Texas A&M's opponent this weekend, as the Aggies will head up there for a road SEC test. Dave, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining us. And if you wouldn't mind, just jump right into what are some of the key storylines, things that you're looking forward to in this game, in this matchup?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. For Missouri, it all kind of starts with this defense that has been arguably the worst in the country this year, or at least worst in the Power Five. They've really struggled against the run. They made some subtle progress last week against North Texas. Nobody's jumping up and down and having a parade at all for beating North Texas, but as bad as they had been, they were better. So that was some progress. They made a few lineup changes here and there. Their offense is still kind of coming together. They do some things pretty well. Tyler Beatty, might be the best running back in the SEC this year, or at least he's in the running for it. Connor Bazelak has his moments at quarterback. They've had a few, tough turnover games. But really, the Tennessee game is the one they really want to get away from. I mean, they had a really close loss at Kentucky, a really competitive, kind of heartbreaking loss at Boston College. You can live with those kind of losses, but then they were just absolutely destroyed by Tennessee a couple weeks ago, and that's the kind that can really kind of set the tone for a rough second half of the season. So they're 3-3. They've been 500 under Eli Drinkwitz since he got here, and they're just trying to turn the corner.
Yeah, that dichotomy, it must be a little bit frustrating for fans and players alike, of having an offense that can move the ball and put some points on the board, but having a defense that is porous.
Yeah, it puts a lot of stress on the offense because you almost feel like you have to be perfect to overcome a defense that just can't get off the field. Against North Texas, I think the positive was they did get 3 takeaways on defense and took a little pressure off of that offense. But they were up big, 41-14 in the third quarter, and they had to be because defense let up a little bit in the second half. So yeah, I think it is frustrating for fans. Missouri fans have been on the other side of this too. There was a year about 5-6 years ago where Missouri had one of the worst offenses in the country and a really good defense, but those games were like 9-3. And now you've got now you can get into some shootouts, maybe a little bit more entertaining, but still really stressful.
Yeah. Hey, Dave. So how do you go from Barry Odom, who was a defensive guy, and are we talking about recruiting? And I see they changed like a defensive line coach a couple of weeks ago. They just failed to get some recruits. I mean, and I know coaches will say 85 scholarships sometimes are not enough, but how did that transpire?
Well, it's been a transition for sure. I mean, everything changed within the program. You go from a defensive minded head coach to an offensive minded head coach, who Eli Drinkwitz is his own offensive coordinator. He doesn't have a guy calling plays for him. He is the guy. He's on his second defensive coordinator now. He had Ryan Walters last year, who he inherited from Barry Odom. He kind of kept the defensive staff intact and then changed it all in the offseason. Brings in Steve Wilks from the NFL, and it just hasn't gone very well. It's been a really rough transition for him. The roster it's close to 50-50 recruits that Drinkwitz has brought in, and then players, holdovers from the Odom years. They've used the transfer portal a little bit, like everybody has, to kind of patch some holes. Defensively, they just don't have. They don't have enough to be a better than average SEC defense, and it's really showed. They thought they were going to be really good along the defensive line because they had a bunch of experience back, but that group really struggled to the point where some change had to be made. It ended up being the defensive line coach who was fired after the Tennessee game. They've only played one game with the new defensive line coach. All they did was promote an analyst, but they played a lot better on that side. They got a bunch of tackles for loss and got some takeaways, scored a defensive touchdown by a D tackle. So there was some progress, but I don't think they've solved all the problems yet.
So how comfortable does Missouri feel to win shootouts? I know that they have like Vanderbilt next or whatever, and that's a good win. But when you look at A&M, do they feel that they have the weapons that they can outscore somebody?
I think Missouri fans in Missouri would have felt pretty good about the chances of doing that a week ago, but not after what A&M did Saturday. I mean, everyone's trying to figure out what's the real A&M. Is it the one that barely got by Colorado and kind of got pushed around against Arkansas and lost to Mississippi State, or is it the one that, just watch, if you only watched one game all season and it was last Saturday night, you would have thought A&M's the best team in the country. So if that's the team that shows up in Columbia, I don't think it matters how well Missouri plays. I don't know if they have a shot. But, we know that there's not a whole lot of momentum from one week to the next in college football, unless you're just a super elite team or you're a really bad team. You tend to kind of stay at the same level all season long. So, Missouri's going to have to play really well on both sides. There's no doubt about that. I think what we saw from A&M Saturday looked more like the team that everybody expected A&M to be. And if they're close to that on Saturday, then Missouri's just has to play its best game of the year to have a chance.
Yeah, Tyler Beatty. How surprised? I know he was, of course, somebody that was high on people's radars, but how much of a surprise has his performance been this year? Of course, number 2 in yards in the SEC coming into this game. I know there was he had talent, but there's probably several other names coming into this season that people would have expected to maybe be above him heading into this game.
Yeah, he was always kind of the sidekick at Missouri. He was kind of number 2 back. He was that change of pace guy behind Larry Roundtree, who they would give the ball to 20, 25 times a game. And, he's the Los Angeles Chargers number 2 running back as a rookie right now for a good reason. He's a really good, powerful, strong back. And Beatty was, more of a third down scat back type. So there was some skepticism that, can this guy do it as an every down SEC running back? Well, he believed he could. He was waiting for this opportunity his whole career. He went on, he put like 20, 25 pounds on this offseason. He's not that little tiny guy anymore. And he's gotten a workload like never before this season. And he's lived up to it. I mean, he's stayed healthy. He's super explosive. He's the kind of guy that every time you give him the ball, he's a threat to take it to the end zone. Whether it's passing it to him or just giving it to him out of the backfield on a run, he's been really special. And they have been careful with his carries. They don't want to give him too many. They took him out. The game was still a little bit in doubt against North Texas. Missouri was up by a couple touchdowns, but with their defense, they're never you never feel safe. And they took him out at the end of the third quarter. And it turned out to work out fine, but he really is a special playmaker. And, he's been Missouri's leading receiver 2 of the last 3 years. Part of that is they don't have great talent at receiver, but also he's just such a dynamic kind of guy that you can give him the ball anywhere. And he's a threat.
I'll probably mispronounce his name, but what about the progress of Bazelak?
Got it.
In the SEC, a lot of times, it gets down to quarterback play. So where's he at, Dave?
He's been solid. I don't think he's been spectacular. His touchdowns are already ahead of last year's pace. It was kind of a weird year for him last year. He came in, didn't win the starting job in camp, but was promoted game 3. And then his first start, he goes out and beats LSU, throws for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, oh my gosh, Missouri's got a superstar here. Well, he ended up playing the whole year, only threw 7 touchdowns, was very solid, very accurate. Doesn't have the biggest arm, or at least the offense doesn't throw the ball deep a whole lot. He's kind of a check down guy, but super smart and tough and poised. And this year he's just, when he's been good, they've been fine. When he's thrown some interceptions, the team kind of follows his lead. So I still think we haven't seen the best of him yet. He's a guy that, again, he's not going to throw it all over the ball field. He's not going to sling it around, 50 times a game. He'll take the check down. He's smart, not a dynamic athlete by any means. I mean, he'll run every once in a while, but he's not the kind of guy that's going to break off a 30-yard run or anything like that. So he's a classic pocket passer. They don't have great dynamic weapons downfield for him to really throw the ball deep a bunch, but he'll hit you once or twice a game. So solid, not spectacular. I think they're still waiting for the best from him.
If you look at the ways that A&M was able to beat Alabama, it was fumble recovery, an interception, the turnover battle, and getting pressure in on Bryce Young with sacks. Statistically, those are things that Missouri looks like they've been pretty good at, not turning the ball over and keeping pressure off of the quarterback. Is that what has been what you've been able to see? Did the stats back that up?
Yeah, they don't fumble. They've done a pretty good job of protecting Bazelak. When they have gotten in trouble, it's when the tackles let down a little bit and they let some pressure in. Tennessee was able to get a lot of pressure on Missouri, and the offense never really had a chance in that game. Otherwise, they've kept him upright for the most part. Again, he's not a super athletic, mobile guy, so they've got to keep a clean pocket for him because he's not going to break it, escape, and scramble many times in a game. he's capable of it every once in a while, but it's not something you go into the game expecting him to do. So yeah, they've been really good in the red zone. They've been really good on third down. So they are a pretty good situational type offense. The numbers might not blow you away, but more often than not, they get the job done when they're in a situation, the kind that you script for during practice. When you do red zone drills, when you do third down drills, those kinds of things, they're pretty efficient at that. And that all, obviously starts with the quarterback.
Hey, Dave, obviously you give Missouri the check for being at home, but what about 11 a.m. starts? I'm always interested to see how teams react to 11 a.m. Is Derkowitz a great motivator? What do you expect from that early start for the Tigers, but being at home?
Yeah, well, they're used to it because it seems like Missouri plays the 11 o'clock game every single week, and the fans don't like it. A lot of Missouri's fan base at home games don't necessarily live in Columbia. Columbia's getting bigger every year, but there's still a lot of fans in St. Louis and Kansas City, and they hate those early starts because, first of all, you got the 2-hour drive, and then you don't really get to tailgate. So, they don't always get the best crowds for those games. Sometimes it just depends on the weather. I think so this is Drinkwitz. I think I did the math right. This is his 11th home game as Missouri's head coach. It'll be the 7th 11 a.m. kickoff. So 7 of his 11 home games have been at 11 a.m. So yeah, you just kind of learn to live with it. Players don't mind them because they've got to practice on Sunday regardless, especially on the road. They don't mind the 11 o'clock games because they get home sooner. But yeah, you got to kind of be self-starters when you play that time of day. Some players too, they don't like sitting in the hotel all day long and playing the afternoon game. I think the fans love the night games because you got all day to party and get ready for it. And it usually makes for a better atmosphere. So this one, I don't expect Missouri to have a huge, great home field advantage. For one, they just haven't drawn the kind of crowds they want to yet.
You got a lot of power, Dave. You get those 11 a.m. kickoffs for your deadlines. I mean, wow, 7 out of 11, man.
I don't mind as far as deadlines go, but no one listens to me.
Is there maybe any intrigue given the fact that A&M and Missouri haven't played the last 7 years? And I mean, the last time A&M went to Columbia, it was a very big win for Missouri, clinching the Eastern Division.
It was arguably the biggest game Missouri's had in a really, really long time because they clinched the East, like you said. And it was, they had played A&M the year before, and Johnny Manziel went nuts down in College Station. And, I think scored 59 points, and it was just a blowout. So that game did mean a lot. It's first time they'll play. Then in 14, they played, in College Station. It did seem like at the end of the Big 12 and then the beginning of the SEC, it seemed like Missouri and A&M were playing every single year. And again, like you said, it's kind of gone quiet here just because of this wacky SEC schedule. So yeah, I think it's good to play again. I think it's going to be good for Missouri to get Oklahoma and Texas on the schedule, just some more familiar opponents. Believe it or not, Missouri fans don't, really get riled up to play South Carolina or Florida or Vanderbilt. I mean, they just don't have history with those teams. And you just don't, especially road games. I mean, it's fun to maybe if you're a fan to go there once, but that's a long trek to Gainesville. So yeah, I think it's good just to get some more familiar opponents in there.
Dave, if you got to pick 2 or 3 things Missouri's got to do to win Saturday, what would that be?
They got to keep up with the turnovers on their side. They can't give away possessions. They're just not good enough to give away possessions like that. Explosive plays. Eli Drinkwitz just earlier today was talking about that's the biggest barometer in winning and losing games, the biggest difference maker. He says the analytics that they use, explosive plays, having them on your side and not giving them up, dictate games more than turnovers do these days, the way he looks at it. And then they got to get something out of their special teams. Missouri's got a really good kicker. Harrison Mevis has an incredible leg. He hasn't missed a field goal yet this year. He's got, I think, 5 50-yard field goals in his career, and he's just a sophomore. So he's a monster. They could use some help in the return game. They returned a kickoff a couple of weeks ago against Tennessee. It's about one of the only good things they did in that game. So just kind of like what A&M did against Alabama. You get a play like that's a spark. You don't have to rely on your offense or defense to do that. It's great for momentum, can get the crowd involved. So yeah, I think something like that has to happen.
This week we talked to A&M defensive back Antonio Johnson, who's from East St. Louis, Illinois, down here doing good stuff for the Aggies. And he talked about how big of a game it's going to be for him personally, with his family and friends going to be there. And a lot of guys he knew on Missouri. On the flip side of that, if you look at Missouri's roster, a lot of guys from Texas on that roster. How how much, Antonio Johnson said it was a personal thing. It's a personal game for him. How much do you think that some of those guys that it'll be a personal game, and off the top of your head, any of the Texas guys that you think might make an impact?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it means, something to them. Missouri has, under Gary Pinkel, they made a living in Texas. That's a big reason why he had so much success, is they really developed a pipeline down there. And then when Missouri joined the SEC, they kind of made this decision to maybe get out of Texas a little bit. And then Barry Odom kind of reversed that and thought, you know what, we had a good thing going down there. We should recruit in Texas more. And Drinkwitz has maintained that. They've got a new starting linebacker, Chad Bailey, was a 4-star linebacker out of Missouri City, who was a big deal when they signed him. He's a 4th-year player, and he just made his first start Saturday. He's had injuries throughout his career, but he's just one guy. They've got several up and down their roster. Maybe not as many as they did when Gary Pinkel, the career was when he was really at his peak, when you had guys like Sean Weatherspoon and Ziggy Hood and Denaro Alexander, guys that made a nice living in the NFL. But absolutely, Missouri, I felt like they never really had a great chance with Antonio Johnson. I think he signed right when they were in that transition from Odom to Drinkwitz, but they've done a nice job getting other players from East St. Louis, one of the most important places they recruit for sure. And he's had a really nice season.
Dave, I guess one of the benefits maybe of an 11 a.m. kickoff is folks traveling to the game could maybe get a good meal for dinner in Columbia. Where's maybe a couple places A&M fans traveling to the game could stop and get a local dinner?
Absolutely. There's some staples downtown that you have to do if you just want a burger. There's a great historic place called Booch's. It's a billiard hall. They only take cash. They don't do French fries, chips only. It's a staple. You got to go there for a couple burgers. Don't expect any frills or anything fancy there, though. It is as old school as it gets. It's literally from the 1800s. It hasn't changed a whole lot. Shakespeare's is the big pizza place downtown. If you like pizza, it's kind of not, I wouldn't call it deep dish, but it's a little thicker than some people are used to, but it's really good. Great restaurant downtown called Addison's. They've got a couple locations, but I would assume people are check out the downtown location for sure. Broadway Brewery is another great one. They've got their own drinks, lots of beers you can sample. And really, if you're just looking to have a few adult beverages, there's a great brewery in town called Logboat, and it's fantastic. It's just north of downtown. They've got all different kinds. They just came out with a new Norm Stewart beer, the great legendary Missouri basketball coach. His picture's right there they do these really cool cans with great paintings, and he's got his own beer. It just came out last week, so pretty cool.
That's great. Cease, you got anything else?
No, that's pretty good. I can remember Norm Stewart. He didn't have to drink too many beers. He had some pretty good seasons. So, but he probably had a few more.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, Dave, thanks so much for joining us. Before we go, of course, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is part of our Lee Enterprises network company. We're sister papers. So got to give you the extra shout out of where people can find you and where people can find your work leading up to the game this weekend.
Yeah, stltoday.com. All of our Mizzou coverage is there. The Cardinals are done. The Blues are just getting started. So Mizzou is the team that's playing right now. So we'll have it covered all week long. Stories and podcasts and videos and all of that stuff too.
Yeah, be sure to tell your Blues guys that they need to have a bad season for my Stars this year. So that's really all the most important thing for me. Dave, thanks so much for joining us, and be sure to follow his stuff. And thanks so much for listening to this video and for the My Yankee Nation podcast. We'll see you next week.